Hey everyone and welcome. We're taking a deep dive into a topic that's practically ripped from the pages of science fiction. Self-driving cars. I mean, seriously, flying cars next, right?
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But yeah, autonomous vehicles are definitely having a moment.
It seems like everywhere you turn, there's a new breakthrough or a bold prediction about the future of driving. So we thought, why not hit the brakes for a second and really dig into what's real, what's hype, and what this all means for, everyone who's ever been stuck in traffic.
Sounds like a plan.
We've got a mountain of research papers and articles here from some major players in the field like, seriously, we might need a bigger desk.
It's a hot topic for sure, but to really get a grip on it, we need to start with the basics. When we talk about self-driving cars, we're actually talking about different levels of autonomy.
Okay, so like levels of self-driving skills.
Exactly. And that holy grail everyone's after, that image of kicking back with a good book while your car navigates rush hour, that's what they call level 5 autonomy.
Level 5, the ultimate chauffeur. So are we there yet? Are those cars already out in the wild?
Well, that's where things get interesting. You've probably heard companies touting their self-driving features, but the reality is there isn't a single commercially available level 5 vehicle out there. Not one.
Whoa, seriously. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about all the buzz.
Right, and it underscores just how complex this technology really is. Achieving true level 5, where the car can handle any situation, anywhere, in any weather, that's a monumental challenge.
It's like we're so used to seeing self-driving cars in movies, we just assume it's a done deal.
Right, and the truth is, it's not just about the technology inside the car. It's about infrastructure, regulations, public perception. Even if we had a perfect self-driving car today, which we don't, there are a whole lot of other pieces that need to fall into place.
It's like building a whole new transportation ecosystem from the ground up.
Exactly. We actually came across this report, the 2018 Autonomous Vehicles Readiness Index from KPMG International, and it paints a pretty clear picture. Even the most technologically advanced countries are still figuring this whole thing out.
So it's clear that there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, but let's shift gears a bit. For those of us who aren't like automotive engineers, what's actually going on under the hood of these self-driving cars? What makes them pick?
Well, at its core, it's a beautiful interplay of 3 key technologies: perception, navigation, and path planning. They all work together to create this illusion of, a human driver.
Okay, so it's like giving the car a brain, a map, and a really good driving instructor.
That's a great analogy. So let's start with the brain perception. These cars are packed with sensors that would make a sci-fi writer proud. We're talking LiDAR, radar, ultrasonic sensors, cameras. It's like they've got superhuman senses.
So they're basically building a much more detailed picture of their surroundings than we ever could.
Precisely. But just like our senses can be fooled, these sensors have their limitations too. LiDAR, for example, which uses lasers to create a 3D map of the environment.
Yeah, LiDAR is like the rock star of the self-driving world, right?
It gets all the headlines. But those early systems with those bulky rotating mirrors were power-hungry and expensive. Now, thankfully, research is moving towards more efficient, scalable LiDAR technology using something called MEMS. There's a fascinating paper by Yu and his team from 2018 that dives into the nitty-gritty of it, if you're interested.
So it's like LiDAR went on a diet and got a serious tech upgrade.
Exactly. But perceiving the world is just the first step. The car also needs to know where it's going. That's navigation.
Right, because having eyes doesn't mean you know how to get to the grocery store.
And this is where things get really mind-boggling. GPS alone isn't enough for true autonomy. We're talking about sophisticated algorithms, particularly something called convolutional neural networks, or CNNs for short.
CNNs, those are like the AI brains, right?
Exactly. These CNNs process massive amounts of data images, maps, sensor readings to figure out the most efficient route. There's a study from 2018 by Doe and his colleagues that blew my mind. They trained these CNNs to actually predict the correct steering angles in real time just by analyzing the data from a car's sensors.
Wow, so they're learning to drive, kind of like how we learn by watching and experiencing.
In a way, yes, but on a much grander scale with way more data, and hopefully without the road rage incidents. And then, of course, there's the final piece of the puzzle, path planning. That's how the car actually navigates the world, making sure it gets from A to B safely, smoothly, and comfortably.
So it's like the difference between a driver who slams on the brakes at every obstacle and one who anticipates and reacts smoothly, like a pro.
You got it. path planning algorithms. And yes, they have intimidating names like Dijkstra and Bellman-Ford take all that real-time sensor data and figure out the optimal path, taking into account speed limits, traffic flow, even pedestrian crossings.
Wow, it's amazing how much thought and complexity goes into making these cars seem, well, almost human.
It really is. And speaking of different approaches, well, that leads us to the next part of our discussion. Different roads to the same destination. Because when it comes to autonomous vehicles, there isn't just one path to autonomy. It's more like, well, a multi-lane highway with different players choosing their own lanes.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So, who are the big players in this autonomous vehicle Grand Prix, and what are their strategies?
Well, first, you've got your traditional car manufacturers. They're largely taking what we call the evolutionary approach. They're basically incorporating more and more automation into their existing models, kind of like building upon what they already know.
So they're taking those baby steps, gradually easing us into this autonomous future.
Exactly. It's like, remember when cruise control was the height of automotive technology?
Oh, yeah, like a luxury.
Right. And then came lane keeping assist, and now we're seeing systems that can handle highway driving in certain conditions. It's all about building on those existing driver assistance systems.
So are they the ones who are going to get us to level 5? Or are they taking a different off-ramp?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? They've certainly got the manufacturing experience and the resources, but some experts argued that their incremental approach might actually slow them down in this race. They're so focused on refining existing technologies that they might miss out on those big revolutionary leaps.
It's like they're trying to perfect the horse-drawn carriage while someone else is inventing the car.
That's a great way to put it. But let's not count them out just yet. They're making some impressive strides. Take Mercedes-Benz, for example. They've got the system called the Drive Pilot, which is a level 3 system, meaning it can handle most driving tasks under certain conditions, but the driver still needs to be ready to take over.
Okay, so you're telling me I can't quite take a nap while driving down the Autobahn yet?
Not quite yet, but it's a good example of how these manufacturers are gradually pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So we've got the established players taking the slow and steady approach, but then you've got those tech giants, you know who I'm talking about, who are known for disrupting, well, just about everything.
Exactly. We're talking about companies like Google with their Waymo project and Apple, which is notoriously secretive about its autonomous vehicle ambitions. They're coming at this from a completely different angle.
More of a move fast and break things kind of approach.
Something like that. They're leveraging their expertise in data, AI, and software areas where they really excel to basically reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
Okay, so less about refining existing car technology and more about building something completely new from the ground up.
Exactly. They're not just trying to make cars that drive themselves. They're trying to create a whole new transportation paradigm.
So, what would that even look like?
Well, for starters, imagine a world where cars are designed from the ground up for autonomous driving. No steering wheel, no pedals, just a comfortable space where you can relax or work while the car whisks you to your destination.
Okay, now that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. But I can see the appeal, especially for those of us who dread the daily commute.
Right. And because these companies are starting with a clean slate, they're not bound by the same constraints as traditional automakers. They're free to experiment, to be bold, and to really push the limits of what's possible.
It's like the Wild West of transportation, with everyone vying for a piece of the pie.
Exactly. But it's also important to note that this approach comes with its own set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, these tech companies don't necessarily have the same level of experience with automotive manufacturing and safety regulation.
That's true. It's a whole different ballgame than building a smartphone or a search engine.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of public perception. Are people ready to trust their lives to a car that's essentially a computer on wheels, especially one designed by a company known for collecting data? These are questions that even the brightest minds in Silicon Valley are still grappling with.
Okay, so we've got the established car makers taking the evolutionary path, and we've got the tech giants shaking things up with their revolutionary approach. Is there a third way?
There is, and it's perhaps the most transformative of all. Think more along the lines of, instead of focusing on individual cars, we're talking about transforming the entire transportation system.
Okay, so bigger picture stuff, like reimagining how we move around in cities, between cities, all of it.
Exactly. It's about moving away from this idea of car ownership and towards a model of mobility as a service. Imagine a world where instead of hailing a cab or calling an Uber, you summon a self-driving vehicle that's tailored to your exact needs. Need to get to work? A sleek, efficient pod picks you up. Got a big grocery run planned. A spacious cargo-carrying vehicle arrives at your doorstep.
So it's like having a personalized, on-demand transportation system at your fingertips.
Precisely. And this isn't just some far-fetched fantasy. This transformation is already happening.
Really? Tell me more. I love this stuff.
So there are these pilot projects popping up all over the globe. Like there's City Mobile 2 in Switzerland, where they're testing out driverless buses that navigate complex urban environments. And then you have places like Milton Keynes in England, which have these adorable little driverless pods that are already zipping people around a designated area.
Okay, those little pods sound both futuristic and adorable.
Oh.
I'm sold. But I imagine it's not all smooth sailing, right? I mean, there have to be some pretty big hurdles to overcome before this kind of transformation becomes, like, the norm.
Oh, absolutely. And some of those hurdles are, well, pretty daunting.
Like what? Hit me with the challenges.
Well, let's start with a big one, safety. It's always top of mind, right? We're talking about machines making decisions that could potentially put human lives at risk.
Yeah, I mean, we trust humans to drive, and we all know how unpredictable we can be. So the bar for self-driving cars has to be even higher, right?
100%. And it's not just about preventing accidents, it's about building trust. People need to feel safe and secure in these vehicles, and that takes time, transparency, and a whole lot of testing.
And then there's the whole data privacy thing. I mean, we're talking about cars that are basically computers on wheels collecting data about our every move.
That's a huge one, and it's something that researchers and policymakers are grappling with right now. How do we ensure that all that data, our locations, our destinations, even our driving habits, how do we ensure that it's protected and not used for nefarious purposes?
Right, because the last thing we want is for our self-driving cars to become like rolling surveillance devices.
Yeah.
Not cool.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even touched on the ethical dilemmas. Like, how do we program these cars to make decisions in those impossible situations where, an accident is unavoidable? Who's responsible when something goes wrong? These are questions that philosophers and ethicists are debating right now, and there are no easy answers.
Okay, so it's clear that there are a lot of complex issues to sort out. But at the end of the day, do you think this is all just a pipe dream? Or is the future of driving truly autonomous?
I'm an optimist at heart, so I believe that autonomous vehicles have the potential to revolutionize transportation, to make it safer, more efficient, more accessible, but it's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to be without its bumps in the road.
So we're in for a wild ride, but hopefully one that gets us to a better place.
Exactly. And the best part is we all get to be along for the ride. It's a conversation that's going to continue to evolve, and the choices we make today are going to shape the future of transportation for generations to come. So stay curious, stay informed, and buckle up. The future is going to be here before we know it.
Well said. And on that note, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the world of autonomous vehicles. It's been a wild ride, and we can't wait to see where this journey takes us next. Until then, safe travels.